Hello, my name is Dr. Finian Fallon. I'm a psychologist and psychotherapist here in Dublin, Ireland. And I'm just offering a few ideas to you which might be able to help you with the current situation we're all in, to help you sort of keep going and try and manage your anxiety and stress that we're all experiencing at this difficult time. The first thing I'd talk about is this idea that has been shared among many different cultures over many hundreds of years, and it's a simple phrase that we come across again and again during these times, and it's to remember that this will pass. And we can sometimes use that as a mantra when things are tough, just to remind ourselves this will pass, this will pass. And again, it is only a temporary time. We're a few weeks away from understanding, hopefully, that the peak of the problems that we're experiencing will begin to fall, even though there'll be maybe a fairly extended period in terms of the aftermath and the risks that still are associated with the crisis. But just remember that these are all just temporary periods in our life. They're historical events, obviously, but it's certainly in our own lives. Hopefully, and well, factually, most of us will get through it very well and fine, and begin to rebuild our lives, hopefully in different ways and more meaningful ways for many of us afterwards. So just to remember that this will pass. There's a type of philosophy called Stoic philosophy that you may have heard. You might have heard people say that some person is very stoic, and it means they're kind of very resilient in the face of troubles. So that Stoic philosophy is really based on the idea that it's not what happens to us, but the way we react to it that sort of counts. So there was a famous Stoic philosopher called Epictetus who lived just after the birth of the Christian Christ, and he would say that one of his quotes is that men are disturbed not by things but by the principles and notions which they form concerning things. So this idea is that our philosophy of life very much informs how we experience life. So we need to be mindful of that and maybe think about how we're thinking and where our focus is. So one of the things I talk about with clients is very often people come in for therapy and they've lost control of some very important, particular aspect of their lives, and it's quite a shock to our system when we realize we're not always in control of things. So sometimes I suggest to people that it's important to just focus on what is in our control in our own lives at the moment, and focus on that, and not to be focused on an out of control, unknown future events or negativity. Just to focus on what we can control, what's under our control at the moment. And sometimes it's useful to do an exercise there of drawing two circles, one of which is a circle of the things we can control, filling that circle with all the things we can control, and the other circle is a list of, includes names of all the things we can't control, and maybe not spending so much time focusing on that. Another part of sort of dealing with the crisis is being able to sit with our feelings and using our consciousness and focus to just be aware of how we're feeling at a given moment. Again, a lot of people are experiencing kind of roller coaster rides of emotion at the moment. So it's very important for us to acknowledge that, and that's okay, that's normal. Your productivity may have gone down if you're working, if you're fortunate enough to still have a job, but your productivity may well have gone down, and that's normal again in traumatic and stressful situations. So acknowledging our thoughts is very important, and sitting with them sometimes. And in my own case, I notice I take a bit longer in the morning just to sit with what's going on, and I have to kind of, at the moment, I'm kind of wake up every morning, I have to kind of re-believe or re-analyze what's going on around us at the moment. It's somewhat like being in a movie, and it's hard to believe, but it is our reality. But again, it takes we can spend a bit of time in the morning just letting it sink into our body and just sitting with the feeling. Some people might call that meditation. And some people may be well practiced in that, but just sitting with how we're feeling, over the cup of tea or coffee or whatever, and just allowing that to be, rather than denying it. And denying it, our anxiety can actually build up our anxiety. So letting it wash through the body when we feel it is a good thing, and just to acknowledge it. So sometimes I'll say to clients just to ask themselves during the day, how am I feeling? And also, how am I breathing? And our breath can be a great link between our body and mind in terms of making sure that we're managing the loop between the two. And if we take deep breaths and just acknowledge our feelings, that can help us just come back into our body and be relaxed as well. So the other part of that, I suppose, is just being open to the experience that's going on as well at the moment, and allowing that to come in. There's lots of things that we're going to hear about in the news over the next few weeks, and there'll be ups and downs in terms of what's going on. So just to accept for what is, that we need to accept what is. I suppose a nephew of mine would often say it is what it is when he comes across challenging situations, which is kind of just a stoic position, I suppose, a stoic view of just dealing with what we have to deal with, and not worrying too much about the things we can't deal with at the moment. There was a famous University of Wisconsin study done many years ago where they looked at the things we worry about, and they found that only about 8%, that's the number 8, 8% of the things we worry about are worth worrying about. The other things that we worry about are things that we probably can't we can't do anything about, or we have no business worrying about. So just remember that a lot of things you're worrying about probably aren't worth worrying about. So, and related to that, a good practice is to put things down on lists, and to-do lists are good things to do in terms of managing our activities and things that we have to do as well. One of my friends, Helen Walsh, talks about this idea of being a worried warrior, and it's okay to be like that at the moment. So it's a great concept, I think, that we are allowed to be worried while we're still doing our warrior business and carrying on with life as well, and that's normal for the moment. So again, just to be kind to yourself, we're under a lot of pressure. Productivity may go down as well, so that's a reality. So be nice to yourself. For some people at the moment, getting up and showering and having breakfast is a good start to half the day. So as I say, be nice to yourself and be kind to yourself. I suppose a big issue that people might have already seen or will be seeing over the next few weeks and months ahead is just managing conflict in home situations and even in work situations, which are kind of very fraught in many instances. But certainly at home situations, being around your partner or family can be very trying for us at the best of times. But having this kind of forced safety, if you like, it can be particularly trying. Again, it's useful what our philosophy about that is. Sometimes, unfortunately for us all, we're very ready with criticisms for the people who are most loving towards us, if you know what I mean. So a lot of damage can be done with that, being overly critical. So sometimes we just need to keep our criticisms to ourselves and just own the feelings around that, and again let them wash through our body, and pick our battles, pick our disagreements. Don't be sort of getting too pernickety about things as well. So minding yourselves not, and doing really basic things like sort of counting to 10, saying that you're going to leave the room and you'll be back later to talk about an issue. In some forms of couples counselling I've come across by Gottman and others, they talk about couples agreeing to use a red card system where they can just lift the red card or lift the hand by agreement, by negotiation in advance, to say to the partner, okay, I've had enough of this argument for the moment, I can't cope with it physically or mentally and I need a break. What happens is when we go into a fight or flight situation, our kind of cognitive or logical brain kind of switches off and we go into our fight or flight brain, which can be very vicious verbally in terms of what we say and very damaging. So it's important maybe not to do that, because again, it takes a long time for couples and relationships to recover where nasty things have been said. So a red card system can be important as well. And also not engaging in what we call kitchen sinking, which is throwing in all of the issues in the relationship that have been sort of residing in the relationship for many years. Just to be mindful of that, it's good to have a boundary around old relationships, and once they're done, let them lie and move on. And again, if you're unable to accept something that's gone wrong in the past and that you've worked out with your partner, it's okay to go, talk that again, but not to throw it into every other argument you have, because it's not fair on the relationship. It can be very damaging to it. So we know from research that's been done by Gottman, the way we talk to our partners is a very strong predictor about whether we'll stay together. So there's a lot of issues in relationships that persist in relationships right the way through, whether it's differences about money or upbringing for the kids or where people live and that kind of thing. Those differences can often persist. That's okay, that's normal, that's a human thing. People will always have differences. But what's very important is the tone and language that we use in relation to our partners. And again, we can predict with a fairly high degree of certainty whether or not people are going to stay together by the way they talk. So own your tone as well, and mind your tone, and modulate your tone in terms of how you talk to people. And that includes, the anger that sometimes we might have in our discussions with our partners, and to own that anger if that's ours. And again, as I said, pick your battles, pick your moments, pick your disagreements, not picking on your partner, because sometimes a lot of that has to do with our own stress and our own anxiety that we're just blurting out into the world, rather than owning and sitting with and sort of letting it process and flow through us. So in relation to that idea of the red cards as well, is not following your partner into another room if they go into another room. It's also very important, I think, for us all to get a bit of privacy during the day. So sometimes we're not joined at the hip with our partners and family. All of us need a bit of time to ourselves. And again, that can be by discussion and negotiation where space is tight. But I do think it's important for that. And I don't want to be too Brady Bunch about it, but it might be a good time to have negotiations around these kind of things. The use of space and shared space and music and noise and all that kind of thing can be very fraught. And again, don't assume that it's okay because someone says it to you. I think it's a time for us all to be quite generous to other people in terms of what we do and say and how we behave. Another element of that in discussion with other people is what we call soft starts. So sometimes asking permission from your partner, friends, or family to have a discussion when you're when you want to talk about something, or agree a time to talk about it, check in about the relationship. Also using I language rather than you language. So you can imagine a scenario where people are having a disagreement and someone is saying to the other person, well, you did this, you make me feel. That's kind of fight or flight language because it's threatening in some senses on a conscious and unconscious level. It puts us into that fight or flight zone where we can't control our logical thoughts, and it can make people very scared or very aggressive or both, and that's not very good for relationships. So generally the advice is to use language like I would like to, or I would prefer, or can we, rather than you, which might help. Social media use is another thing to consider. So we've all heard the phrase rubbish in or rubbish out, garbage in, garbage out. So I think it's the same with social media. We have to be mindful of our use of that and not been soaking up all of the internet every day and spending all day every day on it and taking a break from it. So very often our internal landscape can be changed by the kind of information and people we're around, and how we absorb that can change how we view the world. So just to be mindful of that and take breaks. Also, where you see information coming from WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups, just be mindful of that, whether or not it's helping you or helping other people to share. One very good tip I saw online recently was, if information you see online is making you a bit panicky or a bit anxious, it's going to make other people anxious. So decide whether or not it's worthwhile to send that information. Is it quality information? Is the source reliable? Is it going to help other people? Or is it more about sharing panic and that kind of thing, which can be sort of shared and cause a lot of stress among other people? So just be mindful of that. So kind of have a plan for that in terms of what your plan is, maybe every day or every week. Just think, how's your use of social media going? Is it causing you anxiety, and maybe you need to change it, reduce it, or change the places you go to when you're online. So another big part of this, I think, is our understanding and use of connection. We know from studies into trauma that the quality of connections that people have, their personal network, can be a very good predictor for a good outcome in relation to trauma and crises. So I think that's the same here. So it's maybe a good idea to have a list of people that you might want to contact, expand that to people you might not have contacted in many years, and make the effort, reach out sometimes even if you don't feel like it. It's like going to a party sometimes that you go to and you don't really want to, but you get there and then it's not so bad. So just try and make the effort, and also remember it's not all about us in terms of how we're feeling all the time. It's good to reach out sometimes of our feeling and help other people, because other people might be happy to hear from you as well, and they could do with it. So just be mindful of that. You don't need loads of friends to be happy in life, generally speaking. There's been research done on that, believe it or not, and we found that 2 or 3 people is quite enough. 2 or 3 close friendships is quite enough for people. It may only be 2, it might only be 1, and that's okay. If it's enough for you, it's enough for you. So just be mindful of that. We don't have to be massively popular with loads of connections, because it's very hard to maintain intimacy among lots of people, but having good, authentic friendships and relationships is good for our health as well. So maybe related to that, and related to this idea of connection, is having using time to catch up with a wider range of friends. There's a guy called Rick Hanson who's an interesting guy, and he's a Buddhist scientist, and he looks at the science of taking in the good, and this idea that we have a tendency, in terms of when we come across stressful situations, we literally embody stress through our stress hormones that wash through the body when we're stressed. And if we keep doing that over time, it can actually be very inflammatory for the body. It can cause us physical stress. So he talks about the Buddhists talk about the idea that negative experiences stick to the body like Velcro, whereas positive experiences, because our brain isn't as developed, our body isn't as developed to absorb good experiences in our physicality, good experiences wash through the body like water through a sieve. So Hanson talks about savouring the good and sitting with good experiences and letting them wash through the body and process through the body, rather than just letting them wash away. So sitting for 10 or 20 seconds, if you've heard an excellent lecture like this or something, an excellent talk like this, sit for 10 or 20 seconds after it and just say to yourself, I enjoy that, and let it wash through your body as well. Because as Hanson says, the drip, drip, drip of good experiences and taking in the good can actually overcome a lot more of the negative experiences that we're having at the moment. Planning your activities every week is a good another good technique or good practice to consider if you're having problems with that. Rest is a huge part of that, so getting good sleep and nutrition will help our mood as well, I think, especially at the moment where we're staying at home. But also, as I say, having a bit of fun and keeping in connection is part of that. There's a very good website called getselfhelp.co.uk, which is loads of different practices and exercises and programs for various issues you might have. So have a look at that and see if there's anything there that you might use or even engage with in the family context. So very often there's a form of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, and it basically looks at the various aspects of our environment and our situation, our thoughts, our behaviors, our feelings, our biology, and our environment, our wider environment, and how they all interact. So looking for different aspects of those to improve is very important. So managing our thought processes and behaviors around what's going on at the moment, and also sort of using our body and breath exercises is very important as well. But also making sure our environment is safe and we have adequate food and shelter and all that. I know there's a lot of people worried and have lost their jobs, so hopefully the government will have taken adequate steps for for everyone to make sure that we're all safe and protected. But just make sure your home environment is as safe as possible as well. So that's more or less it. There's plenty of information from an Irish perspective. There's hse.ie has some good advice. Stick with the main sort of places where there's good advice being given, the main government bodies and that kind of thing. For younger people, there's a website called spunout.ie. Childline.ie is another resource, bodywise.ie for people with eating disorders and that kind of thing. There's also LGBT helplines and gender identity family support. Also, to be honest, there's a lot of domestic abuse sort of being reported in the media and obviously on the ground. So in some places it's gone up 30 or 40%. So again, for people who need help with that, call your local police station and get help. The police are the Gardaí are very aware of this risk, and they should be able to help you. So don't sit in misery and in violence if it's causing you. Well, don't do it anyway, and mind yourself and get help. And please do get help and mind yourself. So that's it, really. Thanks very much. Again, my name is Finian Fallon. If I can help any of you with any sessions or therapy or anything like that, give me a call. My details are online. And also at City Colleges we offer online diplomas that some of you might get involved in. I can offer, for anyone who's seen the video, I can offer a 15% discount. So tell them I offer that online if you want to book one of the diplomas on citycolleges.ie. So again, thanks very much. I wish you all the best, and don't forget, this will pass. Keep going. Never give up. Thank you.